Good afternoon, students. So welcome to the week 6 instructor session. And in this session, we are going to go over the week 7 quiz. This is going to be the last grammar quiz for this class. Yay! And then we are going to study sentence structure. So I am going to now share my screen, and we're going to start the lesson on sentence structure. And so this should actually be at the very beginning. This is not very good, so I am not at the beginning. I guess I was looking this over to make sure that there were no mistakes. So can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes. What color is the paper?
Yellow.
Yellow. Okay. So today's agenda is we're going to go over the week 7 forum. What is a comparison contrast essay? Then we're going to go over the week 7 grammar concepts. Then we're going to go over the week 7 practice quiz. And so for the week 7 forum, you're going to start a brand new essay. This would be essay 2. You're going to be doing a comparison contrast essay. Now, in a comparison contrast essay, you will compare 2 topics, 2 people, 2 events, 2 movies, 2 books, or 2 places. Not all of them, but those are your choices of topics. So an example topic, an example thesis would be Los Angeles is a better place to live than New York because Los Angeles has better beaches, monuments, and food. Then paragraph 2 would be Los Angeles has better beaches than New York. Paragraph 3 would be Los Angeles has better monuments than New York. And then paragraph 4 would be about Los Angeles has better food than New York. And then conclusion. So this is very similar to what we did in, I think, the week 4 forum, right after the food game. So basically, you're in the pre-writing section of essay 2. Because once you hand in your week 6 rough draft, final draft, you're finished with that essay 1 because you're done with the entire writing process of that essay, because we went through pre-writing, rewriting, pre-writing, writing, and rewriting, and that's it. And then when we discuss in the week 6 forum, hey, good afternoon, Josie. When we discuss in the week 6 forum the different revision techniques, we are at the last stage of the writing process. And then after that, then in week 7, you're going to start a new essay. And in week 7 and 8 are going to be pre-writing and writing. Then you're going to skip weeks 9 and 10 is something else. So week 7, 8, 11, and 12 are all going to be essay 2. So I'm going to repeat that again. 7, 8, 11, 12. That's all essay 2. And then 9 and 10, 9 is going to be a persuasive post, and 10 is going to be APA worksheet. And then that's it. Then you're done with this class. And I would guess that this class is so much easier than chemistry and anatomy. Everybody agree on that one? Yeah.
For sure.
For sure, yeah. So these are your topics for your week 7 forum. You can compare and contrast 2 different kinds of foods or drinks, 2 different kinds of animals, fruits versus vegetables, childhood versus adulthood, 2 different kinds of music, like rap music versus pop music, friends versus family, reality TV versus sitcoms, emails versus letters, being rich versus being famous. Now, those are the main topics. There are so many more that I will list when you look into week 7. But just so that you're going to know what you're going to do for week 7 forum. Does anyone have any questions? No. Okay, so I'm not going to ask you about your topics. Now the rest of this lecture is going to be just week 7 quiz prep, okay? So here we go. This is the last of the quizzes. And then, there's hot weather versus cold weather and books versus movies. So I didn't realize there were more. Okay, so let's go into week 7 quiz. And here is an example of your comparison contrast essay. I guess I'm still doing that. Home cooked hamburgers are better than fast food burgers because of the price, nutrition, and taste. And so here you have home cooked burgers taste better than fast food burgers. So that's taste, cost, and nutritional value. Now this particular example is found in your Langen in your Langen book although I'm the one that created this info thing, okay, infograph. So you're not going to find the infograph in your book. And then part 5, it would be reason 3, home cook. Part 5, it's not reason 3, that should be conclusion. So that's a mistake. So paragraph 5 is conclusion, and then conclusion, you repeat your thesis statement. Home cooked burgers are better than fast food burgers because of the cost, taste, and nutrition. And then you summarize your essay in five sentences. And that's it for your week 7. Now that's it for your week 7 forum. And now we move into our week 7 quiz. So we're going to go over sentence structure. So sentences can be joined together by either a coordinating conjunction, subordinating conjunction, or a transition words. All of the following sentences are joined together by different conjunctions. If the conjunction is a subordinating conjunction, then the sentence becomes a dependent clause, and you need another sentence to complete the thought. These are known as complex sentences. If the sentences are joined together by coordinating conjunctions, then you have a compound sentence. So you need to learn the difference between a compound and a complex sentence in order to avoid sentence fragments. And so in the essays, I always tell students, learn your sentence structure to avoid sentence fragments. So you need to learn to recognize the 3 basic sentence types in English. So the 3 basic sentence types in English: simple sentence, compound sentence, and complex sentence. So you need to know the difference between these 3 sentences to avoid sentence fragments. So what is a simple sentence? What is a complex sentence? So let's see if you can tell the difference between the 3. John was fat, Mary was thin. John was fat, but Mary was thin. John was fat, yet Mary was thin. Although John was fat, Mary was thin. So which one of these sentences are simple sentences? Jasmine.
Oh.
The first sentence.
Yes, John was fat, and what else? What other sentence is also a simple sentence?
The second one.
Mary was thin. And which 2 sentences are compound sentences? Katina.
John was fat, but Mary was thin. John was fat, yet Mary was thin.
And what is a convenient way to remember coordinating conjunctions?
The contraction. The but. The but and yet.
Yeah, the but and yet. So if you can remember fanboys, for and nor, but yet so, fanboys or yet so, that's fanboys, and those are the coordinating conjunctions that indicate that you have a compound sentence. And every time you have a compound sentence, you always have to have a comma before the coordinating conjunction. What kind of sentence is, although John was fat, Mary was thin? Josie.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the sentence?
Although John was fat, Mary was thin. What kind of sentence is that?
Complex?
Complex. Why is it a complex sentence? Hassan. How is it different from a compound sentence? That's important, actually. Because that way, if you know the difference.
With that although.
Yeah, what kind of conjunction is although? Anybody? It's not a coordinating conjunction because that's fanboys.
I'm thinking.
It's there. The answer is Google blank blank word list equals complex sentences. Subordinating conjunctions, yes. So this is a subordinating conjunction because when you add the word although, so when you just have John was fat, that is an independent clause. As soon as you add the word although, that renders it a dependent clause. So therefore, as soon as you have a dependent clause, then you need Mary was thin in order to complete the sentence. Because if I simply write in my essay, although John was thin, and then I don't say anything after that, that's not a complete sentence. And believe it or not, I see a lot of people write like that. Usually they write, especially John was good. I'm like, that's a sentence fragment. Anything with especially, because especially it's not a transition word. It's not a coordinating conjunction. So in a complex sentence, you have a dependent clause and an independent clause. Whereas in a compound sentence, you have an independent clause and another independent clause joined together by a coordinating conjunction. That means that both sentences are of equal importance. When you have a complex sentence, the dependent clause is not that important, and then Mary was thin is very important. As a result, when I read the sentence, I will read it as, although John was fat, Mary was thin. You will actually read this very fast because it's not that important. What's important is Mary was thin. Now, if I want to read a compound sentence, since both sentences mean this, have the same significance, I will read it as John was fat, yet Mary was thin. Why is it important how I read a sentence? Then as you as the writer, you determine how fast the reader reads a sentence. If you use a lot of complex sentences, you're making the reader read the first sentence fast to emphasize the second sentence for your story. Now, if you use a lot of compound sentences, you're telling the reader each sentence is of equal importance for your story. This is how a writer develops style. And this is also how you manipulate how the reader reads your story in order to influence how your reader emotion about the story. And that's how you become a good writer. Okay, it's these little knowing sentence structure. So this is just a little bit. So here, Mary was thin, even though John. Oh, and another thing is, if the dependent clause is at the beginning of the sentence, you have to have a comma. If the dependent clause is at the end of the sentence, you don't need a comma. So if I say Mary was thin, even though John was fat, then you don't need a comma. And then all of this, but, yet, although, even though, whereas, nevertheless, however, all of these are different ways of saying but. So that's an easy way for you to, so that way when you write your story, you don't keep saying but, so, and. So this way, when you use some of your conjunctions are coordinating conjunctions, some of them are transition words, and then some of them are subordinating conjunction. I did not just say that. You vary your sentence structure. So you're not and. And so here, John was fat, whereas Mary was thin. Whereas is a transition word. Another name for it is a conjunctive adverb. And so here, the punctuation for a transition word is different. So you would have John was fat, semicolon, and then whereas, comma, Mary was thin. And then, so whereas is a transition word. John was fat, semicolon, nevertheless, comma, Mary was thin. And so we're going to go over a lot of transition words or conjunctive adverbs in the week 8 lesson. So I'm going to go over almost that entire lesson just on transition words. In this lesson, I just want to make you aware. And when you have this kind of sentence structure, this is also a compound sentence because you have a transition word is very similar to a coordinating conjunction. For and, but, yet, nor, so, yet. It's just a different way of saying but, and it's just a different way of saying fanboys. And so here, you can also have a period. You could say, John was fat, period. Then you have to have a capitalized, however, Mary was thin. Then my next question is, how do you tell the difference between a subordinating conjunction, even though, and a transition word? What's the difference? How can you just by looking at it know the difference? Can a beginner know the difference? If you're just learning it for the first time, can you tell the difference? Most students tell me no. Most students tell me students tell me they all look alike. What are you going to say?
Oh, I said one of them got 2 words, one is 1 word, but I don't know if that matters.
Nah, but yeah, even though, well, although is 1 word. So how can you tell the difference of although and then nevertheless and however? So since they
Where is that in the sentence?
Although, you can actually have it as although John was fat, Mary was thin. You can also say John was fat, although Mary was thin. And so so you could put although either at the beginning of the sentence or in the middle of the sentence. Just like, yet John was fat, Mary was thin, although that's very British talk. But I'm not going to do British English here. Stick to American English. So yeah, right now, as a beginner, the only way you can tell the difference between a subordinating conjunction and a transition word is you have to Google yourself a transition word list. Then you know that if you use a transition word, then you have compound sentences. Then you Google yourself a subordinating conjunction word list. Then you know that if you use a subordinated conjunction, you're using complex sentences. And then later on, it will become automatic. You'll just like learning to read. Now you know how to. If you were in first grade, you would be saying on, right? Remember sounding it out? At, fat, right? So in the beginning, now you're like John was fat. So someday, when you use this more, you're going to know what a transition word is, just like you know how to say John was fat. It's going to be automatic. So right now, it's not such a big deal. You just have to know that when you have a subordinated conjunction, you have a complex sentence. And when you have a transition word or fanboys or coordinating conjunctions, you have compound sentences. And so, and then you have to know all the different punctuation. Is that clear so far?
Well, I have a question.
Yes.
You had mentioned the reason why you use a semicolon after the fact. Can you repeat that, what you told us? Why you put the semicolon after the comma?
Okay. We use a semicolon because it means and. It's a shortcut for and. So that's why when we use we use a semicolon when we want to link sentences together into one sentence. Normally, John was fat is a complete its own sentence. But if you want to link that sentence, John was fat, to Mary was thin, we usually link sentences in our thesis statement. Because, when you're writing your 3 reasons and then you want your thesis statement to be one whole sentence, well, the only way you can get away with that is you have to have semicolon, semicolon, semicolon for to tie all 3 sentences of your reasons together. So semicolon is a shortcut for and.
Okay, so you're just not repeating the word and all throughout.
Correct.
Okay.
So, and don't ask me how that happened. You're going to have to look that up in the history of English language as to why semicolon equals and. And anyway, so right now for you just have to know the difference between a subordinating conjunction, a compound coordinating conjunction, and a transition word, and a conjunctive adverb, because each of them gives way to a different kind of sentence. So let's go over the sentences. Simple sentence, subject plus verb plus object. A simple sentence is a complete thought, also known as an independent clause. Now, a clause is a group of words with a subject and a verb, and a clause can either be dependent or independent. And so here, Jack gets good grades. Jack is the subject, gets is the verb, good is the adjective, grades is the object. Any noun that comes after the verb is the object of the verb. In other words, Jack gets what? Jack gets good grades. So therefore, that's why the noun that comes after the verb becomes the object of the verb. So Jack studies hard. That's subject, verb, adjective. And so Jack is tall. So here, this is the only time in English that the adjective comes after the noun, because here, tall modifies Jack. Mary is short. Short modifies Mary. This only occurs when you have subject plus the be verb plus adjective. Be verb is I am, he is, she is, we are, they are, he was, she was, they were. And so Mary is short. Steve gambles all the time. And so here you have subject, verb, and then you have an adverb expression of time. All the time is an adverb expression of time. And so that is a simple sentence. And then Steve loses rarely at the casinos. So what are the parts of speech of this sentence? Katina.
Oh, Lord. What's your question?
What are the parts of speech in this sentence? Well, it's easier than
the subject. The subject. You want to know subject, verb, and object?
Yes, you can do it that way too. Steve.
Steve.
Steve is the
Subject.
subject. It's also a noun. Loses.
Right, it is.
Yeah, loses is.
The verb.
And then
And then
rarely.
object.
What's rarely?
Huh?
What about rarely? Most words that end in ly is what part of speech?
It's a doing.
It's an adverb.
Right.
It's an adverb. So anything that ends in ly is an adverb because adverbs modifies verbs. So what is he doing that's rarely? He's losing rarely.
Yes.
So therefore rarely modifies losing. So Steve is the noun, verb, adverb, at the casinos.
Casino is the object.
Yes, casinos is the object, but what is the object of what? It's the same thing. It's a shows time and place.
Preposition.
Yes, so at the casino is a prepositional phrase. And a prepositional phrase shows time and place, such as at the table, on the table, under the table, at 5 o'clock. So I get off work at 5 o'clock. So at 5 o'clock is a prepositional phrase that shows time and place. Then 5 o'clock is the object of the preposition. Casinos is the object of the preposition. Table is the object of the preposition. Do you understand that? Okay. And then at the casinos the prepositional phrase can either be at the end of the sentence or at the beginning of the sentence. And when the prepositional phrase is at the beginning of the sentence, you need a comma. Oh, that will be on your quiz. Yeah. So at the casinos, comma, Steve rarely loses. Just like you would say, Steve rarely loses at the casinos. But if the prepositional phrase comes at the end of the sentence, you do not need a comma. That's the same thing as dependent clauses. When your dependent clauses come at the beginning of the sentence, you need a comma. If the dependent clause comes at the end of the sentence, you don't need a comma. Exception is when you have words like who, whose, whom, which, that. Those are known as relative clauses. And relative clauses have a whole new set of comma rules to learn. Isn't that fun? No.
Yes.
Yes, we want very hard grammar to memorize, don't we? Yeah, really. So Mary likes to dress up. Mary is the subject, likes is the verb. To dress up is the infinitive phrase because to dress is an infinitive. So anytime you have to dress, to go, to say, to think, to learn, that's all infinitives, to plus a verb. So to dress up is an infinitive. Infinitives can be used at the beginning, at the end of a sentence, or at the beginning. Okay, so to grow up in a rich neighborhood, John had the best education, or something like that. That's similar to growing up in a rich neighborhood. John had the best education. When you grow up in a rich neighborhood, John gets the best education. It's all the same. So Robert eats steak. Robert is the subject, eats is the verb, steak is the object. So this subject, verb, object is a simple sentence. Robert likes to dance. So Robert is the subject, likes is the verb, and to dance is the infinitive used as an object because it comes after the verb. So this is all, see, grammar is much easier than mathematics. And grammar is much easier.
I agree.
And grammar is much easier than chemistry. So here you have up the hill. Up the hill is a prepositional phrase. So up the hill sits an old house. And so here, this is a simple sentence. You have a prepositional phrase, a verb, and an old house is a subject. So when you have this kind of construction, this is the only time that the subject comes after the verb. Up the hill sits an old house. And so if you write your sentences like this, you have sentence variety. And also, if you're British, you talk like this a lot more than Americans tend to say, the old house sits up the hill. That's a lot more American English. You go to England and it becomes up the hill sits an old house. I even added a little bit of their accent as well. And yet some of British English has percolated into American English. And also British English is considered more correct than American English, if you want to know. And anyway, so this is a simple sentence, and this is a simple sentence. So subject, the old house, sits is the verb, up the hill is the prepositional phrase. Down the street is the police station. So down the street is the prepositional phrase, is the verb, and the police station is the subject. Therefore, the police station is a singular subject. Therefore, it takes a singular verb, is. So the police station is down the street. So that's subject-verb agreement. So when you have a simple sentence, that's known as an independent clause. It's a complete sentence, a complete thought. And then when you have a dependent clause, that's an incomplete sentence, and that's also a sentence fragment. So are we done? Do you understand simple sentence? Good. Now we're going to compound. Now we're going to compound sentences. So compound sentences simply means two simple sentences joined by for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. And the word compound simply means two. So if I say compound subject, that means John and Robert. That's a compound subject because you have two subjects. If I say John and Robert eats and sleeps, so eats and sleeps becomes a compound verb because then you have two verbs. Similarly, when you say John is fat, yet Mary is thin, you have two sentences. So two, compound, compound, compound. So that's how we have, so a compound sentence has fanboys in it. Fanboys are coordinating conjunctions that join two sentences together. A coordinating conjunction joins two simple sentences to form a compound sentence. John and Mary, compound subject, ate and slept, compound verb. And believe it or not, this is a simple sentence. But then if you become a compound sentence, it becomes John ate steak, but Mary ate salad. And so this but has many different names depending on what grammar book you're using. Some grammar books are going to call it transition words of opposition, transition words of contrast, or contrastive conjunctive adverbs. Isn't that great that all the different grammar books make it so much more complicated by having many different names for the same thing? Does that make your learning easier? So, John slept in a bed, but Mary slept. So, and then you have many different ways of saying but by having, so if you Google transition words of opposition or transition words of contrast, you will find many different ways to say but. John gets good grades. For, he studies hard. And so for is British. Notice how this is Grammarly. In case you're wondering, what is that white box? It's telling me that instead of saying for, which is way too British, Grammarly is telling me, oh, you should be using because. That's way more American English. Sounds way, people would understand. So in British English, if I say that Professor H gives good lectures for her students, get good grades, or for her students study hard, they get good grades. So for in this case has the same meaning as because. So very, very British. Have you ever heard anyone talk like this? Very rarely do Americans talk like this. If you go to England or London, you got to remember that English came from Britain. So that's why we have a lot of their, British, stuff. British slang. That's not really slang. British grammar. So here, Steve gambles all the time, comma, yet he loses rarely at the casinos. Mary likes to dress up so she can feel good about herself. Robert eats steak and he likes to dance. Robert likes to eat steak and likes, why is this not a compound sentence? Why is this a simple sentence?
Is that a preposition? What's that to eat? To when you use to? You just told us.
Infinitive. That's an infinitive.
Yeah, infinitive.
So Robert eats steak, comma, and he likes to dance. So this is a compound sentence. But if you say Robert likes to eat steak and likes to dance, this is a simple sentence because Robert likes to eat. Robert is the subject, and then you have a compound verb. Then compound verb means you have two verbs. So like to eat and like to dance. So basically you have subject verb. Subject plus verb equals a simple sentence. Does that make sense? So don't confuse. A lot of students confuse this with a compound sentence. Usually John goes to the park or he goes to the beach to take his walks. Is this a compound sentence or a simple sentence? Jasmine. Usually Mr. Smith goes to the park or he goes to the beach to take his walk. Is this a compound sentence or a simple sentence?
Compound.
Yes, because you have fanboys. Anytime you have fanboys in the middle of the sentence and then you have to have the comma before the fanboys, that is a compound sentence. And so I'm going to go over more about transition words next week. Is it next week? Week 8 is not next week. Week after next. Okay, so here are some transition words. So transition words of emphasis. Undoubtedly, obviously, particularly, especially, clearly, importantly, absolutely, definitely, you are all going to get good grades. Without a doubt, my students all get straight A's. It should be noted that my students are the best. So here you have emphasis. Addition is another way of saying, all of these words are another way of saying and. So that's why I don't intend to see and in anybody's, you're going to be using, these are known as transition words of addition, along with, apart from, moreover. So if I say John likes to study and he likes to sleep in. John likes to study. Moreover, he likes to sleep in. Furthermore, he likes to sleep in. Also, he likes to sleep in. And so on and so forth. All of these words have the same meaning as and. So if you have a tendency to use and a lot, then you can look up transition words of addition in order to vary your sentence structure. Now these are all different ways of saying but. So if I say John is fat, but Mary is thin, you would have John is fat, or unlike Mary, John is fat, or unlike Mary's. I'll go over that next time. Mary is thin, nevertheless, John is fat. Mary is thin, on the other hand, John is fat. So all of these all mean but. Order are different ways of saying so. So instead of saying well, I can't think of a sentence off the top of my head. So all of these are different ways of saying so and different ways of saying then. So instead of saying, I brush my teeth, then I go to bed. So first I brush my teeth, then I go to bed. Or first I brush my teeth, subsequently I go to bed. Or something like that. So all of these are different ways of saying so and then. So this is why I tell students to look up transition words. So this is just a small sampling. This is not all the transition words in English. There's a lot more. This is just a small sampling. That's why you should Google yourself your own list, so that way you don't repeat the same words over and over again. So far I've done compound sentences, and when you have transition words in the middle of your sentences, that's still a compound sentence. So if I say John is fat, nevertheless Mary is thin, that's still a compound sentence, and you have your semicolon and a comma. So that's a compound sentence. So is everyone clear on compound sentences? Compound sentences uses fanboys and transition words to connect two sentences together. Everybody clear on this? Good. Yes. Sounded like somebody had a question. No? Yes? Going, gone. All right, so the last kind of sentences that I'm going to go over are subordinating conjunctions. Complex sentences. So a complex sentence is made up of a subordinating conjunction, which is a dependent clause. So subordinating conjunction plus dependent clause plus independent clause. So that is how a complex sentence is formulated. Dependent clauses, other names or other kinds of dependent clauses are adjective clauses, noun clauses, subordinating clauses, sentence fragments, incomplete thoughts, incomplete sentences, and adverb clauses. These are all different kinds of dependent clauses. And so a dependent clause can be used as a noun, a dependent clause can be used as an adjective, a dependent clause can be used as an adverb. Does that make any sense to anyone at this point? Usually at this point people go, no. And then I have to go ahead and go, oh, this is how you do it. So you have adverb clauses of time, you have adverbial clauses of opposition. And so my Grammarly is telling me, gee, you need to capitalize. So this is Grammarly is very good at seeing the mistakes. And Grammarly is free too, so it's not like something you got to pay extra. So here are all the subordinating conjunctions, okay? After, although, as long as though. These are all subordinating conjunctions that render a independent clause dependent. So here are some. So one way, in order for you to memorize your subordinating conjunctions, is to use a-u-u-u-b-e-b's. And so a-u-u-u-e-b stands for after, although, as, when, while, until, because, before. So that's how you would memorize a-u. So that's how you would memorize that all of these are subordinating conjunctions that start a dependent clause. And so adverb clauses like a-u-u-u-b start sentences and cannot stand by themselves, as they are dependent clauses and they need another sentence to complete them. And so a-u-u-b sentences cause sentences to become subordinate and cause sentences to become sentence fragments. Adverb clauses are handy because students can use adverb clauses to expand sentences to tell how, where, when, or why, under what conditions. So to remember, a-u-u-u-b's creates dependent clauses or fragments. You can also remember that many song titles or movie titles use a-u-u-b's, after the gold rush, as the world turns, since I don't have you, when a man loves a woman. So by knowing that a-u-u-b's makes for great titles, that is a great way to also remember that they are sentence fragments that need another sentence to complete them. So if the subordinating conjunction is if the dependent clause, so here, after John eats dinner, period, he goes to bed. That's not a correct sentence. So you always have to have, although Jack is fat, he eats very little. So when the dependent clause comes at the beginning of the sentence, you have a comma. As soon as the alarm clock rings, Steve jumps out of bed. As long as I study hard, I can get good grades. Because Michael Jordan is tall, he plays great basketball. Before I go to bed, I brush my teeth. So all of these words, although, as soon as long as, because, before, if, once, rather than, and since, are all subordinating conjunctions that start a subordinating clause that makes a dependent clause. And then when you have a dependent clause plus an independent clause together, you have a complex sentence. Does that make sense? Yes. I do remember when my 6th grade teacher was teaching us sentence structure, and I remember I wasn't paying attention. All I kept hearing was clause, 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 and then clause, 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 which meant that I was lost. Anyway, so grammar when I was a kid was not actually my favorite subject, as you could tell. So unless you do your job perfectly, comma, you will be fired. When I was younger, comma, I used to have more energy. So the bolded words in the table are all subordinating conjunctions. However, if the subordinating conjunction is after the main sentence, do not use a comma. John goes to bed after he eats dinner, so there's no comma there. He eats very little, although he is fat. Steve jumps out of bed as soon as the alarm clock rings. I can get good grades as long as I study hard. Michael Jordan plays great basketball because he is tall. And so sentence fragments are after John eats dinner, because that's not a complete thought. A complete sentence would be after John eats dinner, comma, he goes to bed. So does everyone understand it so far? No questions? Now so far, okay. Now when you have things like who, whom, whose, which, that, then all of the rules you just learned so far goes out the window. You have to learn a new set of rules. So when who, whom, whose, which, that is in a sentence, for instance, if who, whom, which, that are in the beginning of the sentence, you have 2 commas. When who, whose, which, that is at the end of the sentence, you have 1 comma, right? So that's why it's different. I love the table. That is made of wood. So that is made of wood is at the, which is made of wood. Okay, which is made of wood. This is at the end of the sentence. So when which, who, whose, whom, whose, that is at the end of the sentence, you have 1 comma. Now when who, which, that is at the beginning of the sentence, you have 2 commas. John, who is French, lives in Paris. So the comma comes before who and after French. And then this is also known as an appositive. So that's it so far. And so to repeat, your simple sentence is John eats dinner, subject, verb, object. Your compound sentence is John eats dinner, comma, fanboys, he likes steak. He likes steak. Or a compound sentence could be John likes to walk outside. You could either have a period or a semicolon, but you always have to have a comma after the transition word. Therefore, he is fit. So all of these are compound sentences. Then a complex sentence has a subordinating conjunction plus a dependent clause plus an independent clause, and that becomes a complex sentence. So in a nutshell, in English, you have 3 kinds of sentences. John drinks water, simple sentence. John drinks a lot of water, but he is still thirsty, compound sentence. And although John drinks a lot of water, he is still thirsty, complex sentence. And so that's it. Now, things in blue means that this is what shows up on your quiz, and that means you need to make an even more special effort to learn it. So basically what I've gone over so far, that's it for this week. All your grammar concepts, I think. Oh no, I'm wrong. Okay, so for now, so right now you got to learn these verbs. If you aren't going to be able to make it, please call. This is a complete sentence. It's a complex sentence because you have a dependent clause if you aren't going to make it, and then you have please call. This is known as an imperative sentence because you're telling someone to do something. So therefore the word you is understood. So please, you call someone. But in English, we no longer say the you and the someone. People are so lazy. We just say, be quiet. Please call. Sit in your seat. Okay, all of those are all imperative sentences in which you're telling someone, you, to do something. And this is why I tell students to avoid using you and your in your essays, because when you use you and your in your essays, you sound like you're telling the reader what to do. So that's why you're supposed to stick to third person case. But it takes skill to call in sick to work. It takes skill to call in sick to work with a phony excuse. So this is actually a simple sentence. So it takes skill. It is a what they call a vague subject. Takes is the verb. Object is, this whole thing is a predicate actually. So that's a different discussion. But all you have to know is it is an object. And then to call in sick to work, that's an infinitive phrase with a phony excuse is a prepositional phrase. Does everyone get that? First of all, one must be sure to speak directly to the boss. So this is a simple sentence. They're going to ask you on the quiz, is this sentence simple, compound, complex? Then they're going to have A, simple sentence, B, compound sentence, C, complex sentence. So that's why I'm going over this. Anyway, so first of all, one must be sure to speak directly to the boss. This is a simple sentence because you have subject, verb, and object. Today I will be making appointments on the phone. So this is a correct version of the sentence because I will be making is a future tense of appointments. Okay, when I was 4, my father taught me how to ride a bike. So when I was 4 is a dependent clause, and then my father taught me how to ride a bike is an independent clause. That's a complex sentence. Now we get into the realm of dangling modifiers. And that's the last part. Yes, that is the last part of your this lesson. At the age of 4, my father taught me to ride a bike. Why is this wrong? And the answer to that question is the rest of this lecture. So, was your father 4 years old when he taught you to ride a bike? Were you even alive when your father was 4 years old to begin with? No. So that's why this is missing a subject. So it's supposed to have when I was 4, because at the age of 4, who is being 4 years old? Well, obviously it's not the father, so it's the child that's being 4 years old, so that the father is teaching the child how to ride his bike. So correct is at the age of 4, my father, or at the age of 4, I learned to ride a bike. So that becomes correct, because at the age of 4 does not modify my father, and at the age of 4 modifies I. So this is known as a dangling modifier, and I'll explain that more in the next section. I could tell the room had been dusted, for all the pictures were crooked. Remember that 4 means because. Therefore, 4 is part of the fanboys, as in compound sentences, so that means you have to have a comma before the 4. This is a correct sentence because it is part of fanboys, and it is a compound sentence. Here's some more, examples, but it's not in the quiz because I put it in black. We ate dinner, comma, but we are still hungry. Don studied hard, so he received a good grade. So those are all compound sentences. That's it for the sentences of English. Everybody get it? You're all experts in sentence structure now. Now I'm going to go into dangling modifiers. What are modifiers? Modifiers describes the subject-object of the sentence. And so modifiers are words that provide details and descriptions about the subject. And so adjective, John has a blue shirt. Blue is an adjective that modifies shirt. So therefore the word blue is a modifier, because the modifiers describe the subject or object of the sentence. So here, John has a blue shirt. Shirt is the object in this sentence. So here, the modifier blue modifies shirt. Do you understand that? What is a modifier? So you got to remember this because it's going to have true or false. Modifiers are words that provide details and descriptions about the object, and then you're supposed to say true. And so dangling, so here when you have a dangling modifier, that's when people forget to put the subject into the sentence. So visiting the zoo, the birds chirped loudly. So did the birds visit the zoo, or did a person visit the zoo? Driving my car, visiting the zoo, the birds chirped loudly. So did the birds go drive the car to visit the zoo? No. So therefore, it should be, while I was visiting the zoo, the birds chirped loudly. So when you have this kind of mistake, this is known as a dangling modifier. So a dangling modifier occurs when a modifier does not logically refer to other words in the sentence. So here are some more examples. And of course, this is in pink or in orange, because this is exactly what's on your quiz. Walking on the sidewalk, a car raced by. And so did your car grow legs and walk on the sidewalk? No. So therefore, walking on the sidewalk, or while I was walking on the sidewalk, that's the correct sentence. A car raced by. What kind of error is in this sentence? This sentence has a dangling modifier error. That's the answer to that question. While working, an earthquake shook the building. What kind of error is in this sentence? So this error, while, is a dangling modifier mistake. So you're supposed to say, while I was working, an earthquake shook the building, because the earthquake cannot do work. Because whenever you have while I was, so that's missing a subject. So that's a dangling modifier. Having finished the assignment, the TV was turned on. So did your homework assignment grow legs and turn on the TV? Can you picture your notebook having arms and turning on the TV? No, of course not. She's laughing. So after I finished the assignment, I turned on the TV. So this is all missing a subject, and that's known as a dangling modifier. Having arrived late, a written excuse was needed. So having arrived late, so did your written excuse piece of paper grow legs, drive to the school and arrive late to school? No. So that's also after I arrived late, I gave a written excuse to the teacher, and that was needed. So, or I gave a written excuse to my boss. So basically, you have to put in I or he or she or having arrived late. Susan gave a, so it can also be someone's name. Okay, I gave a written excuse to my boss. So here, that's a dangling modifier. And so the introductory phrase, so that's basically it. At the age of 4, my dad taught me to ride a bike. And so I just went over this, is that at the age of 4, modify is, so whatever it is, this is called a modifier, and it's supposed to modify a noun. The noun's supposed to come right after the modifier. And so if you have an incorrect modifier and you don't, or it's missing, that's known as a dangling modifier. So here at the age of 4 is not your dad, it's when I was at the age of 4. My dad taught me how to ride a bike. So all the sentences above are all examples of dangling modifiers because they are missing a subject. Study the colored sentences carefully, for they are all on the quiz as examples of dangling modifiers. Does everybody understand dangling modifiers? Okay, now I'm going to go on to misplaced modifiers. Misplaced modifiers occur when a modifier is placed incorrectly in the sentence, so that in order to correct the sentence, you have to move the words around. And so all the sentences below are examples of misplaced modifiers. And so here, the patient was referred to a therapist with severe psychological problems. Are you going to send your patient to a crazy doctor? Would you send your child to a crazy doctor? Or a doctor who are sick and visibly coughing? Yes or no? No. So here,
No.
obviously, so with severe psychological problems is in the wrong place. The correct answer is the patient with severe psychological problems was referred to a therapist. So if you have to move the words around in order for your sentence to make sense, that's known as a misplaced modifier, because the modifier is misplaced. It's in the wrong, it's placed incorrectly in the sentence. So the new employee will take the front office wearing the brown suit. So is your front office wearing a brown suit? No. So here it's the new employee wearing the brown suit will take the front office. So this is also a misplaced modifier. My uncle just watches one television, one television station. So that's just is in the wrong place. My uncle watches just one television station. Okay, so here you have a misplaced modifier. I will be on the phone making appointments today. So is your phone making appointments? Did your phone suddenly have wings or arms and suddenly it's making appointments for you? No. So the correct answer is I will be making, yes, correct. Correct, yes. On her way home, Jan found a gold man's watch. So that means that the man is made out of gold, just like on James Bond, one of the original movies, had somebody in gold. So do you think that's what she meant? Or did you think she means the man's gold watch? Yeah, so therefore, the man's gold watch. The torn student's book lay on the desk. So I'm going to take one of my students and tear her into pieces. Is that what I'm doing? Or is it I'm going to tear the book apart? So therefore, the word torn needs to be here. The student's torn book. See, here you could tell that Grammarly is not always correct. You see, it's trying to tell me to correct it this way. So sometimes Grammarly is not correct when it comes to word usage. So anyway, the student's torn book lay on the desk. And therefore, Grammarly, this is Grammarly, is not very good at correcting misplaced modifiers. So that's what you learn from that. But it's good with punctuation. So everybody understand the difference between a misplaced modifier and a dangling modifier. And then sentence fragments. And so here I'm going to give examples. Sentence fragments are missing parts of the sentence, like a subject, like if you're missing a verb or missing a subject. And if you have a complete sentence, you have to have a sentence, a verb, and an object. So here are some examples of sentence fragments. Broke the glass. Who broke the glass? So the subject is missing. So correct would be the dog broke the glass. Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Is that a complete sentence? No. You're missing a verb and you're missing an object. So if I said Mr. and Mrs. Smith are old people, then you have a correct sentence, because a complete sentence always has a subject, a verb, and an object. So those are, here are the, these are from your quiz. Not a coworker or secretary. That's not a complete sentence because it's not a complete thought. And not sound like a faker. That's not a complete thought because it's missing a verb and an object. When he is fat, that is a subordinating conjunction and it's missing its independent clause. It's also not a complete thought. Although she sings, it's not a complete thought. And if a person talks to a coworker who doesn't like him or her, this is also a fragment because it's not a complete thought. Okay, and then run-on sentences. Run-on sentences is two or more sentences written as one. A sentence can contain more than one thought as long as it is punctuated correctly. A run-on sentence occurs when ideas are joined together incorrectly. So when you have two sentences, usually you have to put a period after the sentence before you start another sentence. But what if you forget to put your period in there? That's how you have a run-on sentence, when two sentences run together and they're not supposed to run together. So if I say, Mary eats soup, John eats soup too. Mary eats soup and John eats, without any punctuation, that's a run-on sentence. So here you have, John ate dinner, comma, he went to the restaurant. So we don't put a comma in between sentences. So that is an X. So here, the correct answer, here are three ways in which you can correct a run-on sentence. John ate dinner, comma, and he went to the restaurant. John ate dinner, period, he went to the restaurant. Or John, who ate dinner, comma, went to the restaurant. So there are three ways in which you can correct a comma splice. So here, a fused sentence. A fused sentence is when you have two sentences with no period after the first sentence. John ate dinner. He went to the restaurant. And then the comma splice. See, so when you have no comma and you just have John ate dinner, he went to the restaurant, no comma, that's known as a fused sentence. That means the two sentences are fused together. When you have an unnecessary comma, John ate dinner, comma, he went to the restaurant, that's known as a comma splice. And both a fused sentence and a comma splice are both run-on sentences. They're both different kinds of run-on sentences. So John ate dinner, period. He went to the restaurant. John, who ate dinner, went to the restaurant. And then John, let's see, I think I have the spacing wrong. John, comma, who went to the restaurant, ate dinner. So remember that when you have who, whose, which, that, you have to have two commas at the beginning of the sentence. And then if who, which, that is at the end of the sentence, one comma. So that is the rule you have to remember because that's one of the exceptions. And then here are some examples from your quiz of comma splice examples and fused sentence examples. The can of mushroom soup must have spoiled, comma, it was bulging at the top. So this is a comma splice run-on because you have an unnecessary comma after spoiled. The correct one is the can of mushroom soup, it must have spoiled, period. It was bulging at the top. Or you could say the can of mushroom soup must have spoiled, comma, and it was bulging at the top. So you can put in a coordinating conjunction and turn it into a compound sentence, okay? So, or you could put it into whereas the can of soup is spoiled. Oh, no, that doesn't work with this. Okay, so I respect my parents. I resent their attempts to choose a career for me. And so here you have an unnecessary comma, and this is known as a comma splice. Therefore, it's not a correct sentence. Anything with an X means that they're all incorrect sentences. The most popular language in the world is Chinese. More than 1 billion people speak it. And so here you have is Chinese. Here, right here, you're missing a comma. So when you have two sentences fused together with no comma, then this is a run-on sentence. Fused sentence, run-on sentence. And this is also, George knew the answer to the last essay exam question, and then comma. See, this would and then you have to have, he didn't have enough time to write his response. So then you have to put a comma here, or a period here, and then you have to put in a capitalized H. But this is wrong. If you don't put in a comma there and you just leave it like that, then this is known as a fused sentence, and it is a run-on sentence. Then here, use apostrophe S to show ownership. The China doll's dress was a sunny yellow. Brian's hat fell off his head. So the China doll's dress was so this is a subject that has a possessive, this is a possessive subject, and this is a possessive, I think I have a possessive object. I live in Darren's house. So this is a possessive object because it comes at the end of the sentence, and then this is a possessive subject because it comes at the beginning of the sentence before the verb. Because before the verb, it's always the subject, and after the verb, it's always the object. So this is known as a possessive object because you have apostrophe S. Do you believe that cooking is a woman's work? So that is a possessive object, while this is a possessive subject. That's it. Now we do the fun part. And you do all the answering, and I don't have to do too much. So let's start. Are you ready for the week? And after we finish the practice quiz, that's the end of this lecture. So are you ready for the week 7 quiz? Yeah?
Yeah.
All right. The new employee will take the front office wearing the brown suit. What kind of error is in this sentence? A, B, or C? Is it dangling, misplaced?
B.
B. Excellent. Yes, because you got to move the words around. I can't seem to find the keys. This is the first time you weren't late. If you aren't going to make it, please call. Choose the correct sentence. Jasmine.
C.
C. Josie. And not sound like a faker. Is this a complete sentence or a fragment? It's a fragment. Number 4, Katina. Which sentence below is correct? At the age of 4, my dad taught me. Oh, yes, you got it. The most popular language in the world is Chinese. So
We just said that.
yeah, is this? We just did that. I know, huh? So is this a complete sentence or a run-on? Anybody? Run on. So that's B. Which sentence is correct? Linda took her daughter to the doctor who has a high fever, or Linda took her daughter who has a high fever to the doctor.
B.
B, yes. You wouldn't want to take your daughter to a sick doctor. My uncle just watches one television station. What kind of error is in this sentence?
My uncle just
No, actually, it's supposed to be my uncle watches just one television station. That's the correct sentence. This means I have to do this one over because I'm not supposed to give you hints. You're just supposed to know it like that.
Is it
misplaced?
Correct.
B.
Yes, it's B. It's misplaced modifiers. George knew the answer to the last essay question. He didn't have enough time to write his response. Is this a complete sentence or a run-on sentence?
Run
Run-on. Walking on the sidewalk, a car raced by. What kind of error is in this sentence? Is this dangling, misplaced, or no error?
B.
No.
A.
A. And so that's because whenever you have a dangling modifier, it means that walking on the sidewalk, you're left dangling to know, but who is walking on the sidewalk?
Right.
So that's a dangling modifier. First of all, one must speak directly to the boss. Is that a complete sentence or a fragment?
Fragment.
B.
No, it's actually a complete sentence.
Ew.
Yep, one is the subject, must be sure to speak directly.
Okay.
And so this is a simple sentence. While working, an earthquake shook the building. What kind of error is in this sentence? A or B? We know it's not C.
B.
No.
A.
A.
While working.
While I was working.
A.
So does the earthquake have a job and grow legs?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's a dangling modifier. If a person talks to a coworker who doesn't like him or her, is this a complete sentence or a fragment?
Fragment.
Not to a coworker or secretary. Is that a complete sentence or fragment?
Fragment.
Number 14, is that a complete sentence or fragment? The can of mushroom soup must have spoiled.
Run on.
It's a run-on because the Microsoft Word is telling me there's something wrong with this sentence. That's not going to happen on your quiz, though. So modifiers are words that. Oh, so it's not true and false. Okay. Is it A, B, or C?
A.
A. It offers details and descriptions about an object. George knew the answer. Didn't we have this? Didn't we do this already?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, okay. So is this a complete sentence or a run-on? Well, just as well.
Run on.
Yeah,
Run on.
good. Does the following sentence contain a misplaced modifier or a dangling modifier? I will be on the phone making appointments today. Misplaced. I respect my parents. I resent their attempts to choose a career for me. Is this a complete sentence or a run-on?
A.
It's a run-on.
It's a run-on because
Yeah,
because you've got subject, verb, object. That's one sentence. Subject, verb, object. That's another sentence. And when you have two sentences, you got to have usually a period. Or you could go like this. If you add and, that's also correct. Because then suddenly it becomes fanboys, and it suddenly becomes a compound sentence. But if you go like this, that's not correct. So every time you have two sentences and you want to connect the same idea, that's how you get rid of your simple sentences. Somebody who writes an article or an essay and says I, or John. Instead, you could connect those two sentences by using a coordinating conjunction, but, for, nor, so, yet. Or you can make it a complex sentence. So that's ways in which you can connect your sentences together is by either making it a complex sentence or making it a compound sentence. So that way your essay doesn't sound so choppy. If you have many sentences with the same subject, think about using who. If I say John is fat, John likes to eat. So you would say John, who is fat, likes to eat. Instead of saying John, and then your English teacher puts a big fat X and writes awkward. And you're like, what's that? Or awkward sentence structure, she means that you're using the same too many subjects all at the same time. Or it. So avoid using it as well. So that's also very vague. Then your essay teacher won't write awkward, she'll write vague. And then you'll walk away going, what's that? So anyway, do you want to go over the week 7 practice quiz one more time, or are we done for today?
I'm good. I got it.
You got it. All right, so we're done for today. So is that good for everybody? Anybody else want to go over it by themselves?
No, I'm good.
Everybody is good. All right. So I expect excellent grades from everybody everyone's going to get an A on this essay. And don't worry, your faces are not on the recording. I put it this way. So if I say A, nobody's going to know who's getting that A. So that's just like one of those dangling modifiers. Get it? I made a joke. Anyway, now somebody's, well, there's a gazillion Katinas. Anyway, so does any, I don't know why it's flickering like that. Oh, I get it. It's whoever is speaking. That's why it does that. Whoever speaks gets to be in the recording. Anyway, so as long as I'm speaking, then, well, it doesn't matter. So if you have no more questions about your paper and about the quiz, then I can then sign off for today. Does anyone have?
I do have a question.
Okay.
So the paper that's due by Sunday, our essay. So now we had to make sure it's in the right format. Just add the cover page and your site page
Yes.
with your
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and so So I am trying to find how to end my recording. There it is. Wow. So any other questions for me? Any other last minute questions?
Yes. So
Today,
what is being submitted today? Isn't it the essay?
Yeah, this week, okay, for this week, all you have to do is week 6 forum and the week 6 final draft. So both of them, in the week 6 forum, you just submit your, how you revise your essay and your and then your week 6 rough draft. And then that's for Wednesday, and then for Sunday you submit your final draft, which is your midterm grade. So just 2 things to do this week is the week 6 forum and the week 6 midterm, which is your final draft. Next week is the week 7 quiz and the week 7 comparison contrast that we went over in this. So everything in this lecture has to do with next week. This week probably was what I did last week, was week 6 forum and then the week 6 midterm. I would think that out of all your classes, this class should be a slam dunk, don't you think? Yes.
Yeah.
Don't you wish all your classes were either this easy? Then then I guess
just chemistry is the one that nobody likes. He's the one that's writing essays now.
Oh yeah. I just remember that was the only thing I liked about chemistry was we got to writing the essays. I didn't like doing the equations and all of that kind of stuff. Not my cup of tea. I like biology. I like so anything with a lot of reading and writing. Anything with math was something that yuck. Anyway, so because the reason why is because I always needed a tutor. Not because I didn't understand anything that the teacher said.
I need two,
and then until the tutor sat with me one-on-one, and then slowly, while everybody else would do it in 5 minutes, 20 problems, it took me like 3 hours. You know, that sort of. My brother would walk right by me doing homework. I'm spending several hours on one math problem. He walks by, he looks at my math book. 5 minutes in his head. He doesn't even bother to write it down. He's already got the answer. I remember hating him for that, but that's beside the point. So, do you have any questions?
I have another question.
Sure.
So we have to write we have to do a cover page for our essay?
Yes. It's because it's a final for your final draft. You have to have it double spaced. You have to have indent the first line of every paragraph, and then when you write if you have references, you need to do left hanging indent. You have to do a left hanging indent, and then you can find out how to do a left hanging indent by going to YouTube, and one of these days I'll upload a left hanging indent video.
That's only if we have references.
That's only if you have references, yeah. So for essay 1, references is voluntary. For essay 2, references is not voluntary. So for your essay 2, you have to have at least one APA in-text citation and one APA reference. And so we're going to go over how to do your APA references in week 10. So that's why week 9 and 10 is reserved for something else. Okay, so that's going to be something to look forward to, is learning APA and doing your persuasive post. So that's the only break you're going to get from your comparison contrast essay, and then the class is over. So any other questions?
No,
that's it. And then no more quizzes after this. Okay, so from now on it should be smooth sailing. Whenever I take a class, as soon as all the quizzes are over, and all you got to do is write, then for me it's so easy. Writing is so easy. My roommate did not agree, but anyway. So if there's no more questions, I will see you all next week. And I don't remember what I'm going to be doing for next week. Probably business communication, I think, off the top of my head. Then week 8 is going to be transition words. So I'll see you all next week, okay?
Thank you.
Okay.